the situation in, let's say, countries of origin like India is favorable and good, and the economy is doing well, politics is doing well, then the connection is strengthened and gets even stronger sometimes with this second generation or third generation diaspora. If the situation is not so favorable, then the connection breaks down. Again, a long answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dilip, can you hear me? Rajan here from Center for Development Studies. I just...
yes, I can hear you, Rajan.
Yeah, I missed you here again. I have just basically one question. When we talk about the impact on remittances on the SDG goals, we tend to forget the diaspora contribution. I think you started picking up that, especially in the time of crisis, like we had here, Kerala, we had here large floods 2 years back, and we received a lot of money. Now we are talking about new Kerala in the context. We are talking about diaspora bonds. So can you elaborate on that, how diaspora can be involved in rebuilding Kerala, for example? Right now, we are talking about that in Kerala context. And also how important diaspora can also build the Indian economy, because Indian economy have now in troubles. Anyway, we say we have no jobs now. We are talking about growth declining. In fact, some people are even commenting, when I talk to some people, why our Prime Minister is always going out, because he has no jobs in India now. So he's moving around because he has no job in India. So, like a lighter vein. So I think, and also when he took over as a Prime Minister of the country, first term, first 1 year he was moving to the country where a lot of diaspora was there. He went to Canada, he went to Australia, he went to UK, but he never went to Gulf countries because he knows remittances will come. But he was looking for diaspora investment. Is that, all his trips to diaspora countries, can he get back some investment for the reviving the Indian economy? A general big question on India and Kerala.
Rajan, the second question I did not understand. Could you?
No, second question, yeah. For Kerala, about the Kerala floods, new Kerala. India also, we are talking about, the growth rate is very low. Indian economy is not doing very well. This is what we are hearing. Of course, people talk about statistics, problem with the statistical data. But as long as the current government is very keen on creating diaspora environment, for example, you talk about, immigration bill they are talking about. They are talking about, the citizenship card. We have the diaspora cards. One card for coming into India. And also, Prime Minister Modi used to visit those countries where a lot of diaspora was there, like UK, USA, Canada, Australia, but neglecting the Gulf countries during his visit.
Actually not true. He did visit the Gulf countries.
After 1 year, after 1 year. Okay, so I know that he went to Australia. First years of his travel, he mostly went to the diaspora countries. So can it come back for him to help in the Indian economy revival, diaspora investment,
Thanks, Rajan. So, the idea of the diaspora saving mobilization is a very straightforward one, and India has done that in the past with the Resurgent India bond, and then they did the India Millennium Deposits, raised about $9 billion between the two of them in the years 98 and then 2000. And Israel has been doing this since 1951, every year raising about $1 billion. Israel is a very small country, as you know, and $1 billion coming in is very important. Now, in the context of Kerala, where your data, which is the most authoritative that exists on Kerala migration, is showing that nearly $13-14 billion out of the 82 billion that goes to India goes to Kerala alone, with 2 million odd migrants, most of them in GCC countries. So for post-floods recovery and reconstruction efforts, World Bank is engaging with Kerala, and there are two now development operations. The second one is under preparation, and I have been involved with that, trying to help the government think through and prepare for issuing a diaspora bond after the issuance of the Masala bond earlier. The reason for that is that let's say the migrants, mostly Kerala, non-resident Keralites in the GCC countries, have savings, even if it is $200, $300 kind of savings over 3, 4, 5 years, or many of them are there for 10 years now. They have some savings that they are keeping in foreign currency in, let's say, banks in Dubai or Riyadh, and interest rates on those currencies are low, or they repatriate the money to India and keep the money again in either real estate or sometimes NRE deposits or NRI deposits. NRI is not that popular with lower skilled migrants. NRE, rupee deposits, is important. And on that, they get, State Bank of India pays 6.2%. That was my last data point. ICI pays about 6.2% in rupee terms. I can imagine that Kerala could issue a bond and raise financing, perhaps a few hundred million, perhaps even $1 billion. They get out after all 13, 14 billions in remittances. They could raise significant amount of funding by issuing diaspora bonds, selling these bonds at denominations of 25,000 rupees for each, for example, 5-year term, and offer an interest rate of, 7.5%, maybe 8%. Some people think it could be higher, but we have to talk to the diaspora and get their view on how much, and we have to sell it to know whether they will actually put the money or not. The important thing is, if the money is raised, the money should be invested properly, and it should not be used for paying government servants, because then you bring in a debt problem. You have to pay back the debt. So that is one thing. And consultation with diaspora is really key for that. If people have paid money for, let's say, a rapid transit project or something, then they would be more involved in Kerala's development and also in the politics to an extent. So that is sort of the thinking, which can apply also to the national level and to many other states in India, including Gujarat and Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu and West Bengal. Many states. I mean, India has a huge diaspora from many states abroad. And if it is the GCC countries, then the bond should be in rupee denomination. If it is bonds issued to US and UK, Europe migrants, then it should be in hard currency terms. So let's say the US dollar terms. So that is the thinking. Then there is a question of politics. An interesting example is Ethiopia. So about 10 years ago, Ethiopia, they took our idea of doing diaspora bond, and they just issued a bond. They did not register it in the US SEC, and they sold it just like State Bank of India did through the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia. The thing is, the Ethiopian diaspora became diaspora. They left the country because of politics. They were escaping the government in Ethiopia. They are not going to invest in bonds issued by the same government. So there was that little small flaw in the design of the bond. So conversation with diaspora is very important. Understanding the diaspora's political inclination is very, very important. So they might like the country, but they may not like the government. They may not like the project. Those things have to be properly thought through. So that's sort of the main points about diaspora bonds. The key is that once you have established the contact and you have a roster of where the people are, and you are in touch with them, it will be a two-way communication link, and that bridge with the diaspora is key to country or state of origin. So long-term financing option that most financiers would say, investment bankers would say, is a great idea because it diversifies the investor base.
Are there any other questions? If not, let me thank once again Dr. Rath, for spending time with us and responding to all the questions. And hopefully we'll see you when you on your next visit to India.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kerkar and Subhashish. It is great for me to be able to talk at least this way. My apologies that I couldn't make it in person. I was really looking forward to it. I will be most likely back in India in January, and on any other occasion, I'll be in touch, and I would be happy to come and meet and perhaps again find an opportunity to make a presentation if there is interest. But thank you very much for organizing an event on a very important topic that is truly one of the hottest development issues right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll be in touch with you. Thank you very much. So, shall we resume now our... you have something to... No comments? Anybody, any questions? Subhashish?
No, but he has some questions to answer. Can't let him get away with
No, but he accumulate questions, no? Are there any more questions? Niranjan? Pradeep? Before I give it to...
I just wanted to say one thing.
No, in fact, I want to say that you're not, if you'd like to also respond to point made by Professor Bhagat, why money lies unused in these funds.
Actually, I'm not very conversant with that construction fund. It came up after my time. But regarding Campa, I think in January 2019, Supreme Court asked for all the funds to be transferred to a central government authority which would give it to different states, rather than leaving it to the states. So, regarding this invisibility factor, which was being stated that a lot of the migrants don't want to be visible, plus it also then prevents them from getting the entitlements which they are actually legitimately entitled to. Has not Aadhaar made a difference? After all, it has given a bit of identity to them. Secondly, this concept of having one ration card for the whole nation. That means that would allow them to, if it really comes into force, it would allow them to get all their food entitlements regardless of where they are. This is the Ministry of Food's latest initiative, where they say there should be one card, PDS card.
I understand, but the state has to lift the supply. Right?
No, that will have to be worked out. After all, the supplies are being given. I mean, the central government is funding it, isn't it?
But
So it is something which can be worked out. The modalities can be worked out. So similarly, other entitlements can also be given the same kind of color, so that they are not left to their own devices. This invisibility factor is because of the kind of xenophobic reaction in certain states where they don't want the migrants. Their own people are not willing to do that work. For example, I don't think you can get a decent carpenter or a plumber in Mumbai or Pune if you didn't have the migrants from UP or Bihar. I mean, that is something which has to be recognized. But for political reasons, they say jobs for the locals. But the locals are not interested in doing those jobs.
Professor Bhede, you wanted to make any comments?
I just wanted to add, I don't agree in terms of this portability or the one ration card thing. How much it would work in practice, and is something which is yet to be seen. Because in case of the Aadhaar, there were great hopes, right? But if one sees today, and I'm sorry, but I've seen cases where people like multiple voting cards, people also hold multiple Aadhaar cards.
It's not possible.
It is possible, very much so.
How can you have different biometrics?
Yeah, because there is nobody who is in some ways checking all the biometrics at all.
The machine checks.
No, but if you look at the integration of all of this data, I don't know. But I've seen people holding multiple Aadhaar cards.
I don't think multiple Aadhaar cards will work for something like a driving license because it is checked back with the UIDAI. So I don't think.
In which systems it will work, man, I really don't have any idea.
Aadhaar card detail.
Yeah.
You used to have 2 passports earlier.
No. I'm talking
Aadhaar
about
card.
it cannot be.
No, but Aadhaar cards, I mean, I have actually seen them, so I'm not joking here. And but it really depends on how these data and the UIDAI actually is being generated, checked, transferred, not transferred, how localized it is. You really do not have an idea.
Okay, Professor Srivastava, you want to?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So just to, since we had a long and excellent presentation in between on international migration, I just want to say two things which linking up my own thing on internal migration, international migration. One is that if you look at international immigration from India, the one very interesting shift that has taken place is that earlier it used to be generally the locus of immigration used to be from medium and high income states in India to various other states, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Punjab, Kerala, Gujarat, etc. But of course, over the last few years, increasingly the locus has gradually also been shifting to the poorer states, UP and Bihar. The largest number of immigrants today are to the GCC countries, Middle East, are from UP and Bihar. So that's the kind of a convergence in terms of poverty. The other thing is, if you look at the process, it's very interesting that whether you look at this immigration or you look at, for example, the immigration from Nepal, which is becoming so important, there's a kind of a stepwise process that is happening in the way they are moving, acquiring a little bit of skills, moving from the hinterlands in UP and Bihar to cities, either within the own states or to the Delhi NCR areas, acquiring some skills in construction and so on, and then actually also acquiring some contacts, etc., and then gradually emigrating out. So there is that, the earlier that the divide that was there between the poorer states mainly sending out internal migrants and other states which were mainly sending, although Kerala also had a lot of internal migrants who did Punjab and all that, but still in terms of international migration, that is less sharp now. And that has interesting implications for what it is doing to poverty and labor markets and all that, which possibly, perhaps we can, I'm sure that Rajan and others would have done some more work on this, but this is an interesting thing. Now, just 2 or 3 questions which have come up. One is this question of why is there so much, circularity, seasonality and all that? And obviously, it is because it has a very significant link to the growing informality that we have in labor markets. And there's more and more data on that, saying that a larger and larger percentage of workers in the organized sector in this country are informal workers, in the sense that they don't have a written contract or they work on very short-term contracts and so on and so forth. Now, how do you actually move towards the situation? Why is this the case, and can you move towards formalization? I don't want to convert this seminar into a different kind of seminar on labor markets and so on. It's a very important problem. At one level, there is the issue, the fact that the organized sector in labor market in the organized sector in India is at one end more rigid than it should be. And I think there is a great deal of discussion in the NCUS. We had a task force on labor reform, which was chaired by Professor Papola, and that made the case for what we can say flexi security. What is the optimum level of flexibilization or security that you need to have in labor markets, in the organized sector labor market in India? And how do you go about having it in terms of the changes in labor laws and all that, because so that excessive rigidity is avoided. Now, the reason why you need to combine flexibility with security is that if you only aim at flexibility, which the organized sector would tend to do, it's a very short-term and myopic view from the employer's point of view. And having looked at globally much of the organized sector, but also very closely at two sectors, very important sectors in India, the apparel sector, the garment sector, and construction, I can tell you that employers in the industry have actually tied themselves in knots, in the sense that it's impossible for them to conserve and develop skills and develop industrial organization frameworks on the industrial floor, by which they can capitalize on productivity gains. And one of the reasons why we cannot compete with China is because China has done the opposite, despite the fact that it has also a great deal of labor flexibility. So I think these are very serious questions of, how do you capitalize productivity gains, capture productivity gains of workers in an environment which is extremely flexible, where you don't have the same worker working on the shop floor in 2 seasons. The bulk of your workers are different workers each time. It's a very, very important question, and industry, and I've looked very closely at the whole skilling question in construction and garments over the last 10 to 12 years, and this is really one of the Achilles heels as far as this is concerned. Now, if you flexibilize labor, now we have a fixed contract, so, we have changes, the government have made changes, and we have now fixed contracts. So you can actually have fixed term contracts, you can hire people for 3 months, 6 months, and dispense with them. And 3 of the 4 labor code which have introduced say various things about that. I'm not going into that in detail, they do. Now, one very interesting thing is that although they talk about these fixed term contracts, they have not done away. In fact, they flexibilize at the same time Contract Labor Act. So there is a very clear sense among employers that fixed term contracts will do something other than what contract labor hopes to achieve, hiring workers to contractors. What does that hope to achieve? The contractors. So basically, if you look at it very closely, different industries have a different calculus, but contractors do at least 4 things. One, they reduce the compliance cost. They reduce the enforcement costs, compliance costs in terms of labor laws and so on. They reduce the enforcement costs for employers on the shop floor and so on. They recruit, they in different industries to different extents, they reduce recruitment costs. When you're hiring workers in Assam to work in Kerala, and this thing, and finally they reduce wage costs. So it's not that they're doing one thing. And employers recognize that. So employers recognize the fact that they want greater flexibility in terms of fixed term contracts and contract labor. The one is not going to do away with the other. Okay. And globally, there is a great deal of work now on what do you do with short-term contracts, which are repetitive, which require long-term this thing. I'm not going into that, but it's a very complicated area. But in India, we have basically, there is no policy on flexibilization. There is a policy that we must have more flexible labor, but how flexible labor should be at this state, the latest data tell us that about 80% of organized manufacturing consists of employees and workers without any written contract. That is what the PLFS tells you. So that is the extent of flexibilization already achieved. And there has to be, this whole thing that, yes, flexibility. Yes, of course, flexibility. But in what form and to what extent, etc., from the workers' perspective, the industry perspective, and the economy perspective, is an issue which needs to be looked at very closely, because otherwise industries which have long-term labor requirements are only resorting to contract labor or resorting to these kind of informal labor contracts. That's one thing. And that is where, there is this whole matrix on which I've written a great deal, which is migration, informality, labor market segmentation, and this thing. So there you get into this kind of game. This question of Aadhaar, has Aadhaar helped us? One, there is a separate debate on Aadhaar. Aadhaar has screwed up data privacy forever and forever and forever. 70-80% of Aadhaar data has been collected by private firms. We're all, all our bank accounts, all our information is leaking all the time. I don't know how many around this room, but every day I meet people who have lost money. Every day. So I would rather not, basically burden Aadhaar with yet another, social security objective. I would rather have a simpler card which can work, which is just a social security card, and this is what the National Commission talked about. Aadhaar is already, frankly, we're going to regret the day that we did this for years to come. That's my understanding. On one ration card, there are three issues. One is the design. See, this one ration card at Mr. Paswan announced will never work in the form it is, because what has happened is that the data architecture which different states have built up, this is something I've looked at in great detail, is different. It's not the same. So how do you integrate, different data architectures which different states have? Having said that, it's possible to introduce portability within states, which Chhattisgarh has done, which Gujarat has done, and you can have simple algorithms for adjusting supply. It's not a big deal. And if you manage to integrate the data architecture across states, it's not inconceivable. It'll take time. It's not going to happen on the dateline that Mr. Paswan has said it will. It's possible to do it. So I think in principle, it's possible for us now to move towards a situation where a large number of these entitlements can be made portable through simple means, provided we have the right kind of designs and the right kind of framework to do it.
Well, friends, I think we have just met our time limit, and I think thanks to Professor Srivastava and Professor Rath, we had an absolute flying start to this conference. So please join me. I want to make only two points which were not mentioned, but maybe it's wrong the conference to discuss those. But I think some time or other we have to think about the macroeconomic implications of migration. Its impact on balance of payments, in growth, inflation. I mean, there's a kind of size of factor flows we're talking about must have enormous implications. So I think perhaps some point of time we should have that as a just conference based only on macroeconomics of migration. And second, Subhash, it just tickles me that you can test all the deep insights of international trade theory, because you have here India is a great now lab where both factor flows are mobile. Labor is mobile, capital is mobile. We have been brought up by Stolper, Samuelson, everybody on the implication of trade. I don't know. I mean, maybe worthwhile to have some university of Mumbai or other university professors may like to consider the implications of this to trade flows and whole growth implications, interregional growth differences. Because I think nowhere in the world this kind of openness exists for factor flows, like you have as numbers shown by. So I think some of the university departments would like to.
Is now getting more effective. So the tariffs. I think just evaluating that impact on this.
Could be also another interesting thing. So what I'm saying that just after listening to the brilliant presentations, I was thinking about it. There are so many implications, both macroeconomics, trade theory, growth theory, regional economy, that we may require. We can have every year one conference, just exploring different implications of this. Yes. So please join me once again to give my hand to Professor Srivastava for his outstanding presentation. And now some announcements which Hitendra will make.
So I would also want to introduce wonderful doctoral students that we have from 3 different cities and different institutions. We have from Delhi, Gokhale Institute and Indian Institute of Population Studies. So they have been diligently taking notes, and they've also been tasked to present a nice report. So big round of applause for them also. They're sitting sideline behind you.
We're expected to participate also, not just write.
Well, now you've heard it, right? And all your professors are around, so You have been warned also.
And you will not be graded on the question.
And your food is dependent on that. No, food is not dependent. So that's the next announcement. So there's a dinner that we have organized. It's going to start at 7:30 at poolside. Those of you who are staying at the hotel, you may want to go and freshen up. Those of you who are not, you can continue the conversation in the lounge here, lobby area. So see you all. Sorry? Not a good choice. I know, I know. So see you all at 7:30, and today's session comes to a close. Tomorrow we have fantastic presentation, fantastic discussion lined up on political economy of migration and sociology of migration. So see you all today for dinner and tomorrow as well. Thank you very much.